CargoWise Landside is deeply committed to revolutionizing landside logistics. With a complete enterprise system built for modern trucking and container drayage operators that includes proven drayage transportation management, digital rate and quote management, real-time container track and tracing, and on-demand truck, trailer, and container storage. Excellence in container drayage starts with the right software. Enhance transportation management, optimize shipment execution, and improve intermodal business operations with Trinium TMS, Draymaster, GeoStamp Track, and SecureSpace. To learn more, please visit cargowise.com/landside.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TPM Today. It's the February 28th episode, and ironically, TPM Today, it should be TPM 48 hours away today, because we are literally 2 days away from starting TPM. I'm going to be hopping on a flight later today out to LA to join the rest of the container shipping industry in Long Beach. Can't tell you how excited we all are. The whole team is like super jazzed, super energized to put on the best TPM ever. If by some miracle you have not registered already and you're not, but you want to go to TPM, you can use this code that's scrolling across the screen today to take 20% off a new registration. Please join us. There's still time to register. You can register on site if you want, but you don't want to miss out. It's going to be an awesome show. It's going to be the biggest one ever, 25th anniversary. I've done enough selling on this. Just come and join us. Shortly after TPM, 8 weeks from now, the Journal of Commerce Break Bulk and Project Cargo Conference is happening, and I will also be there. You're going to want to join us if you're in that sector of the world, of our industry, I should say. Join us. It's a great event. It's obviously not as big as TPM, but in some ways it's super cool because it's a little bit more manageable, and it's literally everyone who's anyone in that space. And it's also, just like TPM, super program oriented. So it's all about talking about the subject matter and topics that matter to professionals in the space, and then letting you all kind of network and do business on the sidelines. So please join us in the Big Easy in April 23rd through 25th. Really excited to be there. All right, really quickly, I have an awesome guest this week who he will be at TPM. But first, couple things to point out, news of the week. We just posted this story this morning. There's a lot going on in AI, and I've talked about this and I've written about it, but I wanted to sort of take a crack at like what the AI revolution means to this sort of digital forwarding world. Digital forwarding is now like 15 years old. It is not a new fancy curiosity anymore. I think you can argue whether it's actually a separate category from forwarding. But I attempted to look at it with this story that just posted this morning, kind of like how some of the bigger names and even some of the smaller ones are adapting to the AI sort of like onslaught that we're seeing. AI is going to be a huge topic at TPM. And so I definitely encourage you to read the story. I'm not going to be able to go into all chapter and verse about what I talked about in the story. So definitely just read it. I would love your feedback and thoughts on it. LinkedIn, here, email, whatever. Just reach out. Second story, more acquisitions. M&A is really heating up. Green Screens bought for $160 million by Triumph, the payment, banking, financial company that caters to the domestic transportation industry. There's a lot of M&A going on. I did a count after this story came out. So we had our inland distribution conference last September and early October in Chicago. There's 5 people who spoke on stage at that event who just in the 4 or 5 months since inland, their companies have been acquired. So just out of the small group of people that we had within the industry that we had on stage, 5 of those companies have been acquired in 4 months. So there's obviously, it's heating up. And I think the focus is on, both really valuable assets, and in this case, proprietary data around pricing, truckload pricing, real big premium on data that's really good and sort of refined in a way that makes sense for, in this case, brokers to use. So Triumph doing all sorts of interesting things with on the M&A front, and we'll see if they can put it together to sort of make 1 + 1 = 3. And congrats to Don and Matt Harding, my friend Matt Harding, who's at Green Screens, and the rest of the team. It was a great outcome for them. All right, no further ado, my guest. This is, I think by my count, the third person who's made a second appearance on the show in the history of TPM Today, formerly LogTech Live. Michael Rentz, Chief Revenue Officer at Gnosis Freight. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Glad to be in such a good category with two other people being on it twice. So appreciate it.
Yeah, you're in select company. And you are the first person who's joined us on the show from an RV. Why are you in an RV? Where are you going?
Yeah, first person, probably not the last. Like I was telling you earlier, it's definitely a growing piece of the country. We're at an incredible RV park here in Tucson, Arizona. It's fully booked, unbelievable rigs here, very interesting people. We've been making our way across the country from Charleston, stopping in select cities to see some of our customers and interview them. And we're one more day away from Long Beach. So this is my 9th day. I've done 8 nights on the RV. We should be arriving tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah, I should have specified, this is not a pleasure cruise. This is, I mean, it's fun, but it's a work trip, right? Heading out to TPM. So
I have to keep reminding myself that it's a work trip.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, all right, real briefly, for anyone who missed the first episode with you or doesn't know what Gnosis is, what do you do? Who are your customers?
Yeah, so for Gnosis, we're in the international logistics data and software space. We've created our own concept or idea or category that we call container lifecycle management. The easiest way to think about it is it's a combination of visibility, but plus, and probably more importantly, execution, which is a word we're seeing more frequently in the market. It's the operating system for international logistics, and we serve a wide variety of customers. Our main customer, our governing customer is probably the BCO. We build software for them. And just in our industry, when you build products and services and software to the BCO, the service providers find value in that as well. So a combination of data as a service and software as a service, helping people manage the international shipping container.
So real briefly, because this is a topic like I think about a lot as I'm writing about companies that are emerging, whether they're starting a new category or trying to start a new category or building what they hope is an evolutionary version of an existing type of product where the market kind of already knows what it does and maybe they just want something better. Why choose what I consider the harder route, which is like creating a new category and then educating the market about what that category actually is?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I run the commercial side, so it wasn't like we set out, we being Austin, our founder, and Jake, our CTO, to create a category. You know, they started out building real solutions for real customers and, being on premise with them, listening to their problems and going back and seeing if they could figure it out. And then when I joined, we didn't exactly know what it was. We knew there was some visibility. We knew there were some point solutions. And after a while of, really just looking at it, I said, this looks like, what are we doing? These containers are moving in these life cycles. These people have different processes for where the container is. The partners change, the vendors change, the constraints change. And then it just happened. We just called it container lifecycle management. And it's kind of stuck. We liked it. It sounded good. It kind of fit conceptually with what we were doing. And then I think the moment for me, as I mentioned it to somebody that had been in the industry 30 plus years, I was like, what do you think about container lifecycle management? And they just very intuitively started explaining it. And that's when I knew we were onto something, because I think for 50 plus years, people have already been thinking about how they work with regards to containers and the idea that it moves in these life cycles. We just built software that was in service to that and data, and then called it that. And that was the whole creation of the category. And like you mentioned, you kind of left off with it being it's highly educational, and that's right. My job is to tell people about it, and they very often want to say, "Oh, this is like visibility," or "Oh, this is like a TMS," or something like that. And it's always, yeah, but it's something a little bit different and something that's new.
Well, I think you're catering to a lot of importers, and right, importer industry or importers are overweight on the retail consumer goods side, right? So you're either a retailer or you're selling into retailers,
right?
And they've had product lifecycle management tools forever, right? So I think that actually is a concept that is maybe foreign to them on the logistics side, but probably resonates with them in terms of like understanding things instead of discrete processes to be handled. So
For sure. I mean, it helped to kind of dial it in on the import side. We've moved into exports. We have some big anchor export customers here in the US.
I didn't mean to suggest you don't. I just meant like, I know the importers are obviously a big portion of like.
On the export side, you're right, though. A lot happens before the container, really.
Yeah.
And it's more of like goods life cycle management or something like that.
Yep. So, okay, TPM, I'm going to be on site tonight. We start up bright and early on Sunday morning. What are you sort of like, what's your focus going to be at TPM this year?
My focus personally is just meeting as many people as I can, as always. It's the best place. It's very densely packed. You get an opportunity to see old friends is always kind of the coolest part about it. That was the one thing I've learned. I think this is my 6th TPM. It's like a very cherished moment for a lot of people that have been in the industry for decades to get to see old friends. So that's always
like a family reunion kind of.
Yeah, it is. It is. First and foremost, that's for me. I love seeing people that I've gotten to meet in this industry across the world. And then second is meeting new people. Again, it's somewhat prosaic. We're in a software business selling fancy solutions, but it's always about the people for me. And, like you told me before this, it's growing, the event itself. And there's 4,000 plus people, I think, that have registered. So we've set up a lot of places to kind of convene. We have our happy hour at the RV, which is parked outside of the convention center, I think Monday and Tuesday. So it'll be nice to meet new people and kind of hear what they're thinking about it, what they're thinking about the industry.
Any specific I mean, we have the whole tariff stuff. We have uncertainty about whether Red Sea opens up again. We have AI is obviously a huge focus. Any like topical areas that like you or the team are particularly focused on, whether it's sessions or like talking to customers or new people?
Yeah, I think I don't tend to get too distracted by things like tariffs and AI because paradoxically, both of those things are moving so quickly. It's impossible to have an opinion about either one that's going to be relevant in a week. And nobody would have ever thought, something like that. Right. I tend to think about like what's trending with regards to how people structure their international logistics and or supply chain. Like what's popular? Where are you looking to kind of save some money or bring back some efficiency? Are you moving port to port? Are you moving port to door? Are you moving, Incoterms that people are playing with? Yep. How you want to structure your dray carriers, how you want to manage that on the inland side, on the domestic side. So I think there's always some leading indicators with like really well-run international logistics teams at some of these BCOs that use international logistics as a competitive advantage. I just had a conversation with a big furniture importer who has run the international logistics and supply chain team for a while. And I asked him, what's the role of international logistics within the business? Because I think it is business. And the first 5 minutes out of his mouth was talking about their customer. And that's interesting from a logistics perspective, because a lot of the times people think we just mess around with Excel spreadsheets or.
Yeah, a little disconnected from the end customer sometimes, right? Like you get thrown something from another team, and you only get like called if it doesn't arrive when it's supposed to, and then there's other people who think about the customer, right? So, but yeah, right. That's very interesting.
So I think that's going to be a growing trend that's easier to talk about, that will you'll be able to measure for a longer period of time. I forget which general said it, but for a war analogy, amateurs talk strategy, experts talk logistics. I think you're going to see the emergence of like the international logistics manager, the international logistics thinker climb their way higher and higher towards the C-suite for some of these big, well-run BCOs, because it is so critical. It is business, it is absolutely business software as well.
So to your point about moving too fast, that story I referenced earlier, Richard White, the CEO, or now he's the chairman of WiseTech Global, had an interesting quote. He said, because I asked him, are you looking at any particular areas that you're like really focusing on investing in AI? And he said, the landscape is moving so fast. If you put your stake down on one thing, you're going to get passed. So I think just underscores what you said about like not getting too distracted by shiny objects, but like focusing on the bigger picture. So,
right.
All right, late 24, and I'm forgetting the exact month, but it was in the fourth quarter. you guys announced an investment from a PE group or a growth equity group. I forget how to characterize them, but what led to the decision to take that investment? Because we've talked a lot about like when was the right time to take outside investment, what was the right type of outside investment to take, what led to that decision to finally go that route, and what do you think it enables you to do?
Yeah, so it was a private equity firm, Vista Equity Partners, who's one of the premier, if not the premier, software investor in the world. They only invest in B2B SaaS. I think they're the largest software investment firm in the world in software, obviously. And it was an honor for them to consider us as a company worthy of being one of their portfolio companies. With regards to who we raise money from, or who we partner with, it's always been Austin's vision 100%, and we've always trusted him. It's not like we set out to be bootstrapped and to grow a company to the size we were. It's not like we wanted to bypass venture capital. It was literally just showing up every day and seeing if we could convince another customer to work with us. And we always struggled on what we would spend it on, because we were making money and we were more traditional in a sense of value and profitability from the beginning. Yeah. It introduced really good design constraints with how we would prioritize what we would do. And the only thing we knew to do was invest in our product and continue to build solutions that people wanted to pay for. And after, 100 customers, we felt confident that we would have product market fit, for lack of a better phrase. And that caught the attention of Vista. And they do what they say they're going to do. They're high integrity. And that resonated very deeply with us because we're a values-based organization that values that as well. And it just made sense and it worked out. And we were blown away, and it was a really good fit. And it's been awesome. And we're 6+ months in now since the transaction, and it's been a dream come true. Couldn't say anything better about it. So what we'll do with it, I think, is going to be interesting. We're going to continue to double and triple down on, what has made Gnosis successful, which is our product and our service and our model, which is what you could consider forward deployed engineers, and having these on-prem engineers. Like every account has 2 account managers, a data scientist, a solutions engineer, who very intimately gets to know the customer and listens to their problems. And we try to jump into their box. You keep your processes, and we're going to try to fit it within what you want to do and how you want to do it to the best that we can. And that's always going to be the North Star. And doing that at scale is interesting, because you need a little bit of gasoline in the tank to really make it happen at scale. And that's where we are now.
That's interesting, because I think you hear a lot about customers saying more, we need to change when we adopt a piece of software. We need to change to maximize the use of it. So this is like you're kind of taking the counter to that of like, no, let's not disrupt them too much, and like let's just kind of power them more.
That's exactly right, and that is 100% Austin McCombs. And I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but he pulled up a presentation he had put together, a deck from 2017, and it was basically one sentence. And that just speaks to him as a visionary, which he is. And the sense was his whole idea. He didn't know what the product was going to be or what he was going to build or who the customers, but all he knew was that he wanted to use software to unlock change management as opposed to change management to unlock software. That was it. And that's the case, because when you sign up for any other legacy system, once it's fully built out and integrated, all that, it works well, but that could take 12, 18, 24 months to do that. Yeah. But with Gnosis, you can log in and keep your processes. And after 3 to 6 months, we're configuring the way that people log in and what they see and how they work, and connecting the data on our side to facilitate the job that they need to be done. And after 3 to 6 months, change management has happened and you didn't even really realize it. Yep. And so that was kind of spooky to see that Austin had thought that and brought that to life, and then we kind of fell in line behind him to bring it to life as well.
Yep. Well, I mean, it takes kind of a confluence of like lots of lucky and sometimes intentional, things to happen to make this work. Like Jake is an unusual CTO, I should say, in that he's very good at expressing the value proposition of what you're trying to do, but he also understands the ones and zeros, right? And so, and your background was interesting in complementing that too. So, go ahead.
I have the easiest job in the world because I have Jake, and it's always been that way. And Jake's fearless, and he's smart, and he's creative, and he's sociable, and he's hungry. and he's ambitious, and he's all those things in one. And so my job was always just to try to make an introduction and introduce Jake. And Jake has never backed down from a challenge ever. I don't think he ever will. And so it's made my job a lot easier. The interesting thing is, how do you scale that? Which is, I think we've gotten past that from an org perspective as we, gotten a lot more employees and a lot.
You've made a cloning machine?
Yeah.
In Charleston? No.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was going to be my big product announcement, is we figured out cloning. So.
I mean, this may have application outside of logistics eventually, but
yeah, exactly.
All right. I wanted to address something that came up. I can't remember I think it was earlier this week. FourKites, one of the big transportation visibility providers, sort of put out a press release saying we are withdrawing from the Gartner Magic Quadrant on real-time visibility, real-time transportation visibility. You guys, I first was introduced to you, I think, before anyone would consider you a visibility provider or a player in that space. It seemed to me that you sort of like accidentally stumbled into becoming a big supplier of that data. And now I know you supply a lot of the companies that are on that Magic Quadrant, right, with certain aspects of data. So what do you make of that decision? And I think the bigger picture, at least as it was expressed by FourKite CEO, was the category has changed, and the quadrant wasn't really capturing the way that the companies that were in the quadrant were evolving to serve customers. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think for 13 years, we were in an era of growth, from basically the financial collapse until 2022. Interest rates were low. Investment was in search of yield. And people kind of got distorted with what was most important, which was top line growth. And I think now there's been a transition back to profitability. And so people are going to prioritize what actually makes money. And I think that's always been in our industry is real solutions, point solutions. And visibility, in a sense, has always been a means to an end. Yeah. It has one, or from my perspective, one main purpose, where it's like as a BI tool, kind of retroactively looking backwards to measure things, see charts and see performance, which is typically going to find most value from like a C-suite or somebody near the top that wants to look at something like that. But the further you get down into the weeds, and international logistics is a weeds business, you're down here, you're operating, you need operational grade data and tools. It's just a much higher bar, much higher fidelity with regards to products and services. And so I think it's probably smart to migrate into something that is more point solution oriented. With regards to the data, we didn't really set out to be selling visibility data. But if you look at some of the best solutions, whether it's like electric cars or rockets for, it's like they ended up having to make their own batteries or make their own boosters, simply because there wasn't anything on the market that was up to their standards. And I would say that's probably the closest analogy to us, which is we were interested in making cars and making rockets, and we needed the data, the gasoline, the infrastructure to power it. And kind of, again, by the introduction of those design constraints from recommendations from our customers, set out to see if we could do it. We had no idea if we could do it, but that was really Jake's baby. And Jake was able to do it well enough to where we could stop relying on other people and just rely on our own data. And then people found out about it inadvertently, and we solved a problem. And what Jim Newsom said was a 40-year problem, which is just having usable data. And again, I kind of harp on this lately, which is I think about data across 3 dimensions. It's got to be complete, it's got to be accurate, and it's got to be low latency. And those 3 things need to be 98% or better simultaneously, or it might as well be 0%. It's an extremely high bar, because if data is 80% complete, it's 0%. People are going to go back to doing what they were doing before, which is aggregating all of these different Excel spreadsheets, cross-checking ocean carrier websites, port and terminal websites, kind of just looking for what the truth is. So I think that's probably what happened. And that's a good leading indicator to what you're going to see is people pushing back down into like the more operating side of the business and building solutions that service, people at an organization.
I mean, so this is not at all to denigrate the work Gartner does. It's almost like an impossible problem to sort of categorize a market that's like so huge and shifting, and there's just new entrants all the time. But it's clear that a lot of the visibility providers, especially ones that had raised a lot of money, needed something beyond being just a pure like data aggregator that could sell into various entities.
Yeah.
And so that, you've seen, I wrote about this a month ago. You've seen some of them, whether they are like trending toward like execution tools, or whether they're sort of like trending into like 4PL type tools, or like even supply chain visibility, like true, like upstream kind of visibility rather than just transportation visibility. It's clear that like that line item on its own was under scrutiny, absent like some other stickiness to the problem. And then conversely, like there's going to be some providers that are just going to say, we are just going to be the best version of a data provider that we can, and anyone who needs this data will sell them, and we're not going to try to be anything. But that's hard to put in a quadrant, right? Like all those divergent kind of things, because like you guys were never in the visibility quadrant, right? Because you were not, you probably weren't quite big enough, like revenue wise, or you didn't have enough diversity geographically from customers to fit the constraints of the quadrant, or you didn't cover like enough in certain modes, or I don't even know what all the criteria was, but someone would see that quadrant and not even realize you guys are a fairly significant visibility provider in the international space, right? So
absolutely, trust me. I mean, that's arguably what I deal with most in helping customers understand who we are, and then helping them feel comfortable to partner with Gnosis. Is you have to de-risk the decision. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Is still kind of a governing constraint. And when you're in a 2-year freight recessionary environment, nobody wants to get fired when people are already getting laid off for no reason, not for performance. And so helping them, it's easy to kind of go online and double check, who is this company? Oh, they're on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, or whatever. It seems like a safe decision. So, but hopefully, you have the same objective, Eric. Like you have the same constraints that like Gartner does, and you do a great job at kind of skating to where the puck's going to be, and not being biased, and trying to keep people informed without misleading somebody. And so that's why we are starting to do more and more things to help people become aware of Gnosis, and hopefully this helps.
Yeah, I try. Thanks. I appreciate the kind words. Maybe one last question. You're in an interesting position in that your customer base, you get to kind of see across the customer base. If I have a shipper, they're gonna talk about their view of the world, and even 3PLs who sometimes have that same kind of view across customers will have their view of the world. You guys have a bit more neutral kind of view. What do you think are some of the commonalities or differences you see when you look at across your customers right now, maybe from like a technology perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from a tech perspective, I'm seeing on the BCO side an investment in the international logistics teams. I have been shocked lately. Like it's infinite in the number of ways you can structure that. And some top 100 importers had very, very small teams. And I've talked to 2 in the last week on this RV trip.
Surprisingly small, honestly.
Surprisingly small, right? Yeah. Because it just depends on the model. You can outsource the whole thing to a couple big trusted partners. You could bring pieces of it in-house. But I'm starting to see a trend of the BCOs wanting to have more control. And that's a perfect place for technology to kind of step in to allow for them to have more control, especially if you're agnostic. And so you keep kind of the first principles purpose of international logistics from a VCO's perspective, which is you want to diversify your risk. You want to have competitive rates, things like that. But now you have an operating system where you can log in, you can invest in your people that can be trained into a system, and allow kind of a couple strategic thinkers at that organization to kind of play with the different ways they could structure it or partner. And so that's from the BCO perspective. And I really see it similarly on the service side, which is kind of a return to what makes them competitive in a sense. And it's there might be 10 different steps that a service provider does in moving a container, and 8 of those are the same for everybody, but there's 2 steps that are unique to them, and they never want to get rid of those. And back to how we started it is when you partner with a software company, it's like, hey, you got to jump into our box. You got to abandon how you've always done something. That has kind of unified everybody and made it boring and the same. And so I see tech, data, software, whatever it is, kind of enabling these people, these legacy companies with this great history of people getting back to what made them the best, which was in their own mind, their creativity, how they want to do business, who they want to partner with, and the things that can be discussed at dinner. as opposed to, hey, I'm just moving a container from point A to point B. So I see it as a sense of unlocking what makes this industry great, which is the people and the ability to facilitate face-to-face communication. I think that's true from a trend perspective for AI as well, which is there's gonna be nothing but humans left. When we outsource everything to the agentic AI models, let them talk to each other, so it'll be nothing but human.
That's a good segue. We have lots of interesting sessions at TPM Tech this year on AI, and also on like what makes shipper technology more approachable and easier to maybe implement, and also like cutting down on that time to value, the ROI, like slashing the cycle on that. So that's a good teaser for. I'm very excited. Okay, last question. We're right at bumping up against time. Last time you were on the show, you said still My Morning Jacket and Jimi Hendrix were your two favorite bands. Do you have I know you probably still like them, but do you have like an indie thing that you've kind of like been on lately?
Yes. Yeah, I still like Jimi Hendrix and My Morning Jacket, but I've been listening to a band, Mo Lauda and the Humble. I just bought tickets. They're going to be in Charleston. They sound very similar to My Morning Jacket, but I've noticed that I've picked up on a lot of their songs lately. So that's my take.
There's a new one for everybody. Michael, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. This was an awesome chat. Wish we had more time, but I'll see you in like less than 48 hours.
Are you going to come to the RV?
I will stop by the RV for sure.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. See you.
Absolutely. See you soon. All right, cool. Really quickly, we're over time, but you got to stay. Dad joke of the week. It's a good one this week. What's the difference between a revolution and cows in space? One is a shot heard around the world, and the other is a heard shot around the world. Thank you very much to my son for supplying me with the joke this week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michael. Awesome discussion. It could have gone on forever. I hope to see you all in Long Beach starting on Sunday. We're like literally 48 hours out. Really excited about TPM. Register now if you haven't. And in any case, have a great weekend wherever you may be in the world. Really appreciate the support for the show. And I'll see you on the other side of TPM with another great episode of TPM Today. Bye, everyone. Thanks.